Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another Winter Talk session. Just let us give us some minutes for people to connect the audio and to all join in. Just bear with us just a few minutes. Meanwhile, I can introduce myself. My name is Joana. I've been representing the Interaction Design Foundation group in Lisbon. This is a Lisbon group initiative. I don't know if all of you know Interaction Design Foundation. It's an online platform for interaction design courses. So you can have courses from beginner level to pro level. There are plenty of options. If you don't know it, do check it out. It's worth it. And the Winter Talks are an initiative in partnership with OutSystems, which is a low-code platform, and with the Disruptive School of Education, which is also a school with many interaction and motion courses. So do check them out as well. This will be our last Winter Talk. And don't worry, we'll have spring ones. But we invited Bruno Figueiredo to be our last speaker of this session. Thank you a lot, Bruno, for accepting to be our speaker, and thank you all for joining us. I think Bruno will be able to answer you some of the questions if you want to pose while he's speaking in the chat. But in the end, we will have a Q&A session so you can unmute yourselves and make your own questions. So with no further ado, Bruno, I will let you introduce yourself. And thank you all once again.
Goddamn mute button. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Bruno. I'm a brand designer. I call myself a creative every now and then. Not sure if that's actually correct, and an all-around geek. But most of my friends call me Steve, actually, not Bruno. And yes, that is the Star Wars pajamas, and this photo was taken during lockdown, of course, because I look like I'm about to go to bed. Not exactly, but okay. So carrying on, today I'm actually going to be talking about, yes, design is for everyone, fight me on that. And I really wanted to get started to start a conversation around the anatomy of what this title means, for me at least. And yes, as in, because we can't deny it, designers have been for years advocating that good design is something that should be accessible to everyone. Then design is for everyone, as in we've reached the age of democratization, because I don't believe that it's just people have the right to use good design, but also have the right to start being part of the process of design and creating design. I think that we got to a point where we have the tool set to actually have that in a generalized way, but it's still not exactly like give everyone the freedom to go. I think there's still some things there, some details that we need to talk about. And then fight me on that, just because I'm really just starting this. I'm not an expert or a subject matter expert on this. I'm learning as I'm doing, and I really want to be challenged. I want people to talk with me and pose their own opinions, pose their own questions about this topic, and let me know what they think about this, because it's something that I keep very close to my heart, that everyone should have this as a tool, which is still different from everyone is a designer, which is part of the conversation that I'm going to have forward, but that's it. So I decided to divide this talk today in 3 parts. The first one is the age of design democratization, and explain what this means. The second one is explaining a little bit what's the role of the pro designers, of the professional designers. And the third one is some examples of things that are out there that already exist that match this idea of the age of design democratization. Part of them are projects that I've known or I was part of or I've seen grow just in the last year or two, which has been when I feel like it started to have some shift in the way that things work. So let's start by the first one, the age of design democratization. And first of all, welcome to the age of design democratization. Welcome to the age where this is actually for everyone. That's what I think. But it's not just design, it's the age of knowledge democratization, of technology democratization, and of community-driven democratization of all of these. So I picked these three topics because I think they are essential to everything that is in some ways democratized in the world. If you look at the way that we can use tools and we can use skills nowadays, they probably had these three baselines behind it. There's a fourth, which is cost. So if it's free, people are going to do it. But I don't think that's the key part. I think that comes as a result of all of these three existing. But that doesn't make us special. Like, this doesn't make design the only thing that has this. So I'm going to start to actually go and get some examples of things that also fit this profile and things that are also related in some ways to what we do in terms of design or what we've been doing with design from ages, since ages, sorry. First one, literacy and what changed everything for literacy, which was education. So it took humanity over 5,000 years to actually enable most of the population to communicate in written format. Okay, so since we started to develop languages, it really took us a long time to get to the point where almost everyone knows how to write, how to read, and communicate between each other. If you look at this chart that you can find on that website, ourworldindata.org/literacy, since the 1800s up to this point, it's when everything kind of changed. So only 12% of the population in the world could read and write in 1820. So that's approximately 1 in every 10 people. Let's put it like that, which is a really low number. Now, in 2016, we kind of reversed everything, and it was only 1 in every, only 3 in every 20 people, let's put it like that, if you want to round up a little bit, could not read or write. So it took us up almost 200 years to kind of change this. And to put it into more perspective, only in 1945, by the end of the World War II, half of the world population could read or write. It's really close in time if you look at the way that humanity has been developing. And it has to do with a lot of small details that have to do with the sharing of knowledge, the access to technology, and the communities that support. So the sharing of that knowledge, and this is why I have education here, was education became part of every day for almost everyone in the world, because there was a need to actually enable people to read and to write. At first, that was the only thing, right? It wasn't more than that. Eventually, that was going to help the workforce that back in the age of industrialization needed to be more proficient in some things. So education became key to share knowledge with everyone. And that knowledge was shared through technology, originally books, because we know that these became essential and they also became more widely available back then. And then eventually this kind of grew and you got television, radio, video, internet, whatever communication channels already exist, they share knowledge, they share information. And for sure, many of the people that couldn't access it before, and if you think in Portuguese terms, telescola, which is something that now is happening again, but back then when it was really necessary in Portugal was because people didn't have access to even the books sometimes. Those were channels of expanding this knowledge, this access to information, to literacy as a tool for everyone. And last but not least, community. And for me, what was key to this, to actually get to everyone, were the social movements. Yes, industrial revolution kind of push it forward and started giving tools to working class because they wanted a more instructed working class. But then if it wasn't for movements like the social rights movement and the suffragettes movement, then it's not. Women, people of color, and all the other people who were excluded or put into classes couldn't access this. So this was also really recent if you look at the way that the world has been working. So it's probably started in the last 100 years. And it makes even more sense that only in 1945 we got to 50% of people could actually read. So these three blocks kind of made literacy, something that everyone in the world has a right to use. Like they have the skill of writing and reading. But imagine if it was actually backwards. If these three didn't exist, nowadays, only one people in every 10 people could write or read. How would it be? Like the amount of things, the amount of software that I have right in front of me right now didn't even like exist in the next 200 years, probably. So you can see how this kind of changed things. The second thing that I want to talk about that also fits this is photography and the world of digital photography. And photography is a use case that I think has gone by a really similar process that design, which was the tools became so widely available that it allowed everyone to use it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So if you look at photography, even photography has a history that it's like ancient. The first camera obscura, or the pinhole camera, existed in ancient Greece, 5 centuries before Christ. And we don't think of creating images like that, but the technology for that started being developed back then. Now, if you look at the first photo that was ever taken by Nipke, it was only in 1826. And Nipke called this process heliography, from the Greek helios, meaning drawing with the sun, which was the original idea. Only by 1925, you had the first commercially available 35mm camera, which was like a 1. And from that point on, you know that photography kind of like started exploded. We can take photos, we can take cameras with us. We don't have to carry on those big, boldy things on our backs, which was great. And then the first revolution, the real revolution, was actually portable, disposable film cameras. Why? You don't need to actually know how to use them. You click a button and a photo is taken. So everyone can use, everyone can register the day, everyone can register their families, their moments in life. So it was really, really simple. But it still had some limitations. So you actually could take photos, but you weren't really making photos. You were trying to register a moment, but you would still not have the tool set or the skills to then pick what you had on that little box there and turn it into photographies. Chemical development processes back then were expensive, although they were massively adapted in the world. Dark rooms, not everyone had the space in their rooms to have one. And nowadays, it's still the case, but it's even more expensive because it became something more, less and less used, right? So you had the second revolution that came with instant photography. And if you guys know how fun it is to take a photo with a Polaroid and just seeing it like reveal in front of you, and please do not shake it. That's not how it's done. I know that everyone thinks that it is, but that actually ruins the photo. But this was actually the moment of revolution where everyone started kind of having access to photography and having a faster way to create memories and a faster way to create images and a faster way to build something, right? But then this came, digital. This guy here is Steve Sasson, and he was the first person ever to create a digital photographic camera. So I have a little timer here with 15 seconds because I really want you guys to just go to the chat, sorry. And I'm going to start the timer. And I just want you guys to try and guess in what year did he invented this camera. So I'm going to start that in 3, 2, 1, go. 15 seconds countdown. Don't be shy. Okay. 82, 77, 50, 79, and done. Okay, time's up. Steve Sasson developed this camera in 1975. That was the first ever digital camera that existed. It actually weighed 8 pounds, so almost 4 kilos. The photo was 100 by 100 of resolution. And you can see here on the right side that the photo was recorded on a cassette tape. It had a 0.1 megapixels resolution, 100 by 100 pixels. We do icons with more resolution than that nowadays. But this moment was key because it was a moment where we started to change the way that we registered images. And then eventually things evolved and digital became a thing. All of us in our youth probably had a point and shoot like the little Canon over there. If you started working with images at a certain age, you would probably have bought a DSLR or the more modern mirrorless. And the technology around digital actually evolved to the point where a company called Litro developed these little cameras over here that you could take photos and focus after you took the photo by mechanical and digital processes. So technology evolved to a point where people could actually use photography in different ways than just taking an image and that's what you get. And editing photography and what's not, of course, there's a lot of work there, but the technology of how digital photography worked like this was amazing. And then you have the actual revolution, which is smartphones. And we all know that smartphones were what made photography a global thing. Not just photography, but also video. Because then it was something essential to you. It's like, okay, I can live without a laptop, but I can't live without a smartphone because the smartphone is my laptop, because it allows me to connect, it allows me to create, it allows me to register my day today. And it became essential in the way that we actually do our lives. Of course, there are people that don't take as much photos, but the fact that you can just take something out of your pocket and register a moment and it's immediately ready, that was a game changer, the last game changer. And from this point on, it's not like you could evolve a little bit more. Probably you can put cameras on glasses and what's not. I think that already exists. I know that there are on smartwatches, but the fact is photography, when it came to the point of instantaneous results, that's when everything kind of changed. Then the part of the knowledge came a little bit earlier, but came with the profession. When photographers became artists and when photographers became experienced in taking photos of products or it's not, they had to create rules. They had to create a little bit more guidelines for everyone to actually start and make sure that everyone kind of understood how they should use light, how they should use the machine, how the chemical regulations work. So it kind of went from science to actually becoming a thing of their own, right? So the knowledge was created and shared because they were professional photographers. Then eventually, all other photographers picked it up through community, social platforms, which was the boom. And of course, we all know that probably the #1 social media for photography nowadays is Instagram. But think about it. Flickr and Tumblr have been sharing photographies for years ago. Like in terms of platforms, they were focused on that for ages. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest are all photography-centric platforms in many ways. Although they have texts and they have messages, photography had to be part of their experience a lot because people wanted to register and share moments. And then if you even go a step further, nowadays, you have photography-driven communities like Unsplash, which is people who are tired of having the same old stock photography, and Unsplash created a community of photographers that were okay with sharing their images globally with no limitations. So you can actually get photos from people that just give them out to you so that you don't have to wait for those barriers and the legal stuff around it. Viesco, which was kind of a game changer on mobile photography on some levels. And now this is really recent one. It just came live a while ago. There's this company called Dispo from a YouTuber called David Dobrik. And Dispo is trying to go after Instagram in a different way. They picked up the disposable camera concept and they say, you have a network where you can have people and you can share your photography, but when you take a photo, you only get it the next day. So you need to wait for it. That's it. They changed the whole thing and they said, the instantaneous thing was actually not being good for us. So let's try go back to when we actually had time to think and wait for our photography. All of these medias create communities around photography, create communities around how people build images, how people share images. And that kind of changes things. And the same thing happened clearly with video. We all know how YouTube works. We all know that streaming nowadays is completely bonkers, but it kind of went through the same process there. Photography was just easier. Nowadays, video kind of is overtaking photography because it's also so easy that people prefer moving images than actually a still shot. But when you get the tools, when you share knowledge widely, this becomes true. And imagine this, like if you could only take 24 photos with your phone, and if you have to wait until you would change again your little film roll to use it again. Like I use analog photography, I love it. Like I don't shoot as much as I want, but I have my camera here. And I have 36 photos, if I'm not mistaken, on this roll. I've been taking photos with it for the last year almost, because ever since we got into lockdown, I didn't really use it as much. Imagine that experience on your phone. Imagine the immediate gratification of taking a photo and having an image ready, not being something that you could do nowadays. Imagine having to communicate a moment like this, an event, and not being able to actually record that moment. It became critical in our lives. It became part of how we communicate. And that's really interesting to see how technology becomes democratized to this point. And then the last one that I want to talk about before design is coding. Like coding and the way that open source kind of broke the rules on how coding works for the world. And I love this one. Scare a designer in 5 words or less. Designers should code. It's a classic of the internet. So since it's a classic from the internet, and since it's actually a question that I think is completely relevant, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a timer on it, and I'm going to question you guys. Should designers code? Yes or no? The chat is open and you have 15 seconds. So many people say, nope, nope, no, no, no. I put it as the question is, when will designers code? Because code, as we exist, is not the same anymore. And like Joanna and me, we know about it. Bernardo is also here on the call, he knows about it. And a lot of other people that have been working in the industry understand how code is changing and how software is changing, know about it. And for me, it's more like when will code become something as in the same level as literacy or photography, when everyone can do it and they don't really think about it. It's a matter of choice, of course, but in the end of the day, you're going to see that code, as everyone still conceptualizes it and in the way that things work, it's going to be different. It's not that you need to code to actually do your job, it's that you can code to do or build things, or you can design code, which is a really interesting concept, but it's more and more common than most people think. So I'm going to start with another really quick quiz. This lady here, Ada Lovelace, is still widely known as one of the first people ever to create code. She created an algorithm. Again, what year do you guys think she created an algorithm? I know the photo helps a little bit, but I'm going to start the countdown in 3, 2, 1, go. People got flabbergasted with the idea that someone like this could code. Okay, 1900s and 1765, says Lorenzo. 1843. So someone in between there, kind of, yeah. But 1843 was the first time someone ever wrote what we could consider a piece of code. Some historians say that actually it was before this. She wrote an algorithm for a machine that an Italian guy had invented. And they say that he actually wrote some algorithms back in 1836, 37. But this was the beginning of computing as we know it nowadays. So you can see how actually the concept of code also changed in so many ways since coding exists. And back in 1943, only in 1943, you would know code from, you would see binary code being created and electrical storing. So what we now call hard drives and what's not. So up to this point, you didn't really have the concept of ones and zeros. It's not yet been 100 years from that point. C++, one of the most used languages in the world, was created in 1983. And only from the 1990s forward, so in the last 30 years, you have HTML, PHP, JavaScript, Java, which are modern coding languages. They are 30-year-olds and they are called modern coding languages, at least for most awareness and what people learn. But these were actually the ones that got people into creating things really easily, really fast. So that you understand the amount of people that code, you now have 1.84 billion live websites, or more than that right now live. Websites need code. How you put that code there, I don't know, but they need code. So people are actually building websites at the rate where you have 1.84 billion websites online. The apps in App Store are over 1.85 million. And the value in money that code for application has by 2026 is like giant. Like code is actually a thing that everyone can do and everyone does. And like, it's really became something that geeks love and technologists love to create tools, but now everyone can use it. Because immensely because of this, open source. Open source kind of changed the game. It went from people actually having control of what they are creating and them coming out and say, hey, here's my code, learn with it, use it, break it, create something new. And the fact is that the way that GitHub and other platforms that nowadays are really known, like Android, that runs on open licenses and Linux software, changed the way that people build things, was huge. GitHub is one of the biggest communities of creators of whatever online, just they work on top of the concept of open source, of sharing knowledge. And this for code was literally a boundary that went from knowledge, technology, and community. It was when things started to change. And I'll tell you more. It's estimated that over 78% of all companies in the world run on open source code. So think about that. Open source code is probably free. Some companies like Facebook, Google, or Microsoft run on pieces of free software that they pay no one to maintain. And if someone finds a fail on them, probably all these systems can go down. But in the same way, they were made possible because people said, hey, use it, pick my things, grow and scale and create something new and do a revolution. I don't know. That was the thing. Open source created standards for people to actually use, reuse, recreate with code. And it kind of changed the way that we started doing things. Now, after that, you start getting maker communities that kind of supported that, where people were sharing knowledge. Like if you ask a programmer if he can do his job, he says yes, with Stack Overflow open on a tab. Period. Like that, it's immediately the type of things that people remember, because communities are really important to how people actually write code. You're not going to memorize every single line of code that exists in language. You're going to learn, you're going to be building. Then you have places like Product Hunt, which is more of a maker community, focused on people that many of them aren't even coders. They are just creators that found tools that help them build software, or are creating software that helps other people build tools. And that's it. And other communities are more specific and others are more empowering, like Women Who Code. Reddit is not just about coding, but there's a huge developer community there. And you can see how these things kind of influence how people share information, on how they democratize the practice and make code something that everyone can do. And then there's the age of no code. And this is what I was meaning, like no code is not no code. Low code, which is what part of the technology that we have at OutSystems, where me and Joanna work, it's not less code than everything else. Everything you've seen back then went from zeros and ones to written language, and now it's visual. And I build websites using Webflow, which is a visual coding tool like this one, which is this one up there. There are people who build apps and really strong things with visual design or visual hierarchy of things through OutSystems, which is this tool over here. So it's still code. They call it no code because people can't see it, but it's code at their core, and you can do it. You can build things really fast. And the fact is, I actually took me like 20 minutes to build a website for this talk. that I have live right now. If you go to this site.webflow.io, you have a website with links for my Twitter, my email. For that account, it has a link to my website, and it took me 20 minutes. And I coded. I just didn't write the lines of code, but I coded. So that's why I say that code becomes something really important. And it's going to be a little bit like a second language. The way that people need to understand that building tools becomes part of actually being human. That's when things are going to change. And you can even now go and build them on your phone. And I'm not kidding. These two apps here, on the left, you have Universe that allows you to build a website entirely on your smartphone. And Alea, exactly the same thing, but as a really interesting twist. There's an AI machine that you tell them, build me a website for a designer. And they use patterns that I know, and they build you a templatized website for designers from just an inputted text. And if you're a designer like me, AI is designing for you also. Jordan Singer is a really interesting guy. He works on a lot of apps of himself, from himself. Like he has this little thing called Lil Software. But when GPT-3, which is like a generative language model, was launched into the world, he created a plugin that runs on Figma where it describes the app, and the software uses the language, uses like website examples from all over the world, and designs the app for him. So he didn't even have to design the app that he wanted. He just tells him, I want an app that has navigation bar with a camera logo, photos, title, add a message. So he explains what the design is. And if you wait a little bit, I actually left the link for his Twitter because this is his pinned tweet. He clicks there, and the bot, GPT-3, picks this, and he designs the tool for him. He designs what he was imagining in his head, because code exists in open ways, and even machine learning, which is something that we think like, oh, artificial intelligence is really hard to work with. There are free models out there that do this. This is powerful. And in fact, we need to start learning why this is important even for our job as designers and as creators. So as of right now, only 2 in every 100 people in the world can code. Imagine if that changed to the levels of literacy, where only 1 or 2 in every 20 can't code. The amount of difference that the world would have from people actually being able to do it. And this is a little bit where design comes in. So you have knowledge, you have technology, and you have community assigned around this. And you put it in design, and design is something a little bit more broader. Or at least I want to think it is, because what the fuck is design ever? Like, really, you guys have a definition of design? This is an actual question, because I'm going to do this. I'm going to give you like 1 minute and 30 seconds. I'm actually going to turn on some little bit of music. Give me a second. Let's see. Put a little bit of music here on the background. And I'm going to give you guys 1 minute and 30 seconds to think, what is design, and try to write an answer here on the chat. Go. Something that's never been done before. I like that one. Mediation, understand and solve a problem in a very simplistic definition. I love that one. Solution, solving problems, useful. Communication of ideas, also, of course. Functionality before it looks pretty. Great one. It's life. Okay, I still have 48 seconds, so I'm not sure if everyone answered. I'm guessing everyone answered because no one is kind of answering thing. It's life, it's deep, that's for sure. Pretty much anything that involves thought, planning, and execution. Miguel Correa, have you been reading Google definitions of design?
Not really, no.
Just playing with you. But yeah, all great answers. So I'm actually going to stop the counter. I think there's a lot of answers here. So I say this because now I'm just going to go and shut down the music a little bit. But because like, if you ask 18-year-old me, I would go and I would say, design is creating logos and drawing posters from brands and for brands and cultural projects. I did a lot of this. I don't trust this guy. He's sketchy. Look at him. Like, you can't trust this guy because he doesn't know what design is. And I was learning a lot. really, because back then I was under the influence that the graphic design and visual design was the only thing that existed. But then I started learning what design is. If you go to Google and you ask it, it's going to say a plan or a drawing produced to show a look, function, or workings of a building, garment, or other object before it's made. So immediately we're defining design as planning things. It's thinking things before we create them. Then if you go to straight School of Design, generally speaking, is a process of envisioning and planning. Envisioning, like immediately big words there. The creation of objects, interactive systems, buildings, vehicles. It's user-centered, as in users are at heart of the design thinking approach. So these guys are influenced by the idea of design thinking at the School of IDEO of design thinking. If you guys don't know what design thinking is, you can check it out. It's actually something really cool. Oh, they're solving problems for humans. Sorry, Maria, I didn't saw your answer, but that's actually a really good one. So I went after these more informed answers, and I actually went after some people that I really look up to. And one of them is Don Norman. Don Norman has a book called The Design of Everyday Things, which is a classic for any designer to read. And it's incredible. It's not just design as in learn how to use shape or what's not. It's more a little bit more about the psychology behind design and even a little bit about the political side of design. It's not. So he says that design is concerned how things work, how they are controlled, and the nature of the interaction between people and technology. I agree. Like all of these definitions became my definition of design. And sometimes I think it still feels difficult to put this in these words because sometimes we feel that design is a little bit more. Another person that I also really love his work in terms of ideology is this guy called Mike Monteiro. And yes, he says, sorry, I'm such an asshole, because if you read his work, if you read his books, he's always going to look like an asshole. Although he isn't technically an asshole, he's just saying truths that people don't want to hear. So he puts it as in design is a big job. It encompasses multitudes. There are as many designers out there as things to design. And I agree with him. Like, look at this. Look at this wall of designer roles. And I'm not even putting here the roles that are not called designer. I'm just putting like some roles that for some reason are called designer. Okay. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds and you guys can look at this list and try to understand if you want to put something there, but what type of designer are you? Just go. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Write it on the chat. Service designer. I think I forgot to put service here. Didn't I? Damn it. I missed service. Then identity, business designer, graphic communication, UX, UX, UI, digital design, visual UI, UX product, UX, UI. Immediately, we already have so much difference just from the people that answered in the chat. Okay, 30 seconds are done. If you talk with me, and I've only been doing this for the last 11 years as a profession. Before that, I was actually already working as a designer in a specific area that I'm going to talk about. But think of this. I studied multimedia design. That was it. Since then, and by myself, I was called a brand designer. I did UI or UX and UI sometimes. There was a lot of time that people called me a multimedia designer. There were times in my career more recently where I was called a visual designer or a communication designer. I did motion work. I did packaging work. I did editorial work. And I actually did textile design. That was where I started. My parents have a textile factory, and I designed in CAD software for weaving, which is completely different from anything nowadays I do, but I know how that changed my expectation of what I wanted to be. Like, I wanted to be an architect back when I was like 14. Then when I was 16 years old, I started helping my parents in a factory, and I started doing design for weaving fabrics, for little ropes and tapes. And that process was so interesting to me. And understanding how the software saw, okay, you have a pixel design image here, and now each pixel is a cross-section of two lines. These lines are going to go either above or below. And that's how I learned how weaving worked from a computer to the loom. Up to this day, we still use floppy disks to do that. I help my parents with that. And the machines work with floppy disks because there's not many information there. It's just saying it's positive or negative, 1 or 0. But the software was done with pixel design. And that really got me interested in what design was. And I've done a lot of these things. I wouldn't say that I did actual UX design because I'm not a researcher. I'm a brand designer. I'm a communicator. I'm in a lot of those things, but I did a lot of these things. So like this person, there's even a lack of truly global statistics on what are designers and where designers are. But like, try and name one good report that tells you how many designers exist globally and how many of us actually do something different. Because if you look on Google for number of designers worldwide, first article that showed me was top 50 fashion designers in the States. Like there isn't like a report that says design, like Jesus, ever. But we are all designing experiences, aren't we? Are we? That's the thing. Are we? Like, what is the definition of an experience? If you look at some of those roles, like a fashion designer is designing an experience when he's designing a garment, or is, we don't know. And the fact is, it's really difficult. There's Dribble, which actually did a global design survey. It has 1,700 respondents. Most of their responses, although they weren't from the US, all of them, they focus on responding with people from the US. It's still not enough. And you see things here where they go to the types of designers, and they went with graphic, product, brand, illustrator, user researcher, web designer, UX, art director, motion. It's still everything in the realm of digital. Designers work in the industrial world. Industrial design was the predecessor of product design. They were creating the ergonomic tools. They were creating a lot of stuff. And we kind of got to a point where now, since everything is digital, we kind of define the definition of design as something that we use in digital worlds, but it's not. And we don't even know how many designers there are out there, how many people there are. Then there's a different question, which is, what is good design? And in case you guys don't know, there's actually a person that tried to answer this. This guy here, an industrial designer called Dieter Rams. And if you don't know who he is, I can put it like this. He is the reason why Apple is actually good at design, because Johnny Hyde copied everything from him. He learned from it. And if you look at there, you can see something that he designed for Brown in 1958, and then you have the iPod in 2001, which was by Johnny Hyde. He is really someone that went and said, there are rules to good design. There are things that you shouldn't do when you're trying to create products, when you're trying to design things that make it a good design. One, if it is innovative. Two, it makes a product useful. Three, is aesthetic. Four, makes a product understandable. Five, is unobtrusive. Six, is honest. Seven, is long-lasting. Eight, is thorough and down to the last detail. Nine, is environmental friendly. And 10, it involves as little design as possible. This is a person with a German philosophy type of thing. They were very perfectionist and they really wanted products to last through time. And he was an industrial designer. He wasn't designing experiences for a browser. He was designing radios and appliances for the home. But the way that they kind of evolved into thinking how design works still applies to nowadays. So it's actually really cool to see how people started understanding what is design before design existed in the realm of digital. So the last question is like, where does design fit? Because like photography, it fits neither art or science. It fits a little bit of both. Because the fact is, there are designers that are designing things that are closer to art than they are to actually products and things and actually useful things by the end of the day. There are designers that are working in the field of science completely. Like they are creating and defining new things. If you look at the link that I left here, there's an episode on Abstract, a series on Netflix with Mary Oxman. She runs a team in MIT of bioarchitectures, which is scientists and designers developing new materials, developing new ways of actually existing in this world. And they consider themselves designers. They are designing the future of whatever. So it's actually really cool to see that we are neither one, neither the other. We kind of fit on both fields. And like code, it actually allows us to build products and solutions. That's why the no-code and low-code tools are actually using design, a visual approach of design and building blocks to accelerate how we build things. Because it allows us to build things. Many people in this room said, I'm a UX or UI designer or a product designer. You guys draw rectangles for your life. Like you draw rectangles on a square or you actually do user research. Yes, great. you build things. Although you're actually not building it, you're defining how it's going to build. So you're building it. So like code, it allows us to build. Much like literacy, it allows communication with everyone, which is incredible. Like there are global symbols. There are things that we know, and when it comes to communicate and to create experiences, we know that people understand them quite easily. And none other have the focus on serving everyone. Like there's no other discipline than design that is actually focused on that, on serving everyone. A language is focused on serving the people that need to speak that language. Code is focused to serve the people who use that product. Photography is just a tool that is used to record or create images. But design is usually made to think and more think about how everyone can use whatever you're building. Everyone and anyone. There's no difference there. It might be even a vampire or an astronaut or a ninja. It doesn't matter. Design is really focused on serving everyone, or at least it should. And this comes a little bit to how we actually have a privileged seat influencing humanity. Look, design is really something that went from not being like people didn't know what design was, and nowadays it's in the mouths of the world. Everyone talks about design. And people use design as a really broad term for everything. Like God designed us humans. Like even religion has design somewhere in. So think about that. So going back to this, I'm going to go through a little bit about knowledge, technology, and community. So design and what? Do we have like something that opens design to the world? Do we have something that actually made design different? Probably there are, like, but I think design by itself kind of works. And the knowledge, there were two phases to it, in my opinion. First one, and Dieter Rams was part of that part, was a little bit of elitism. Old school design and industrial design was great, but they kind of like were the club of the designers where people kind of shared information with one another, but they weren't really open with it around the world. And then eventually, when we got to a point where people could learn by themselves, design became a tool more widely shared, right? It became self-teaching, like people learning. If you go to the office, to a office or a team, if you look at a team nowadays that is composed of designers, I'm not sure how it is everywhere, but in my team, I know that most designers have been studying at college, but I know that in the States, there are thousands of self-made designers, people who learned to do design because they wanted. In Portugal, one of the most awarded small studios in Portugal, Bureaucratic, as a head of studio that is a bioengineer that decided to start designing logos. And now he designs his team designs web experiences. So people kind of learned a little bit. So there was a little bit of a difference from physical to digital when you went from closed group practice or the golden age of design, where like there were really beautiful products and it's not. Then when digital came in, people kind of started sharing more information. They started using more things, more tools, more skills, and creation became really easy. Then came online communities. And I'm just listing a few here. I actually put a timer here because I wanted to know how many of you think you've learned something on an online community. Like how many of you have learned a little bit about design on an online community? So I'm going to give you 15 seconds to save me or not me. Go on the chat. So I'm guessing like 100% of you, if I'm getting it right. There you go, 100%, right? Like if you look at these little channels that I have here, like they are just a few examples of millions of them. If you look at, if you really look at the issue of how things exist. But if you go to YouTube nowadays, you can actually find something there immediately that is like design course or whatever. If you go to Behance Dribble, you're probably going to find people sharing their work and you can learn with them. If you go to Twitter, design Twitter is a really weird part of the internet. I got to tell you, I'm part of many conversations that I never thought I would have on a social network, but they exist on Twitter. And then Medium is a really, it's been overflown with technical knowledge in terms of people actually sharing their stuff and trying to teach to other people. So I think knowledge and community is kind of always a little bit side by side. And then there's the digital design tools that enable people to do whatever they need to do. And you know what? I actually know that this is more true than ever. So you just watched four slides designed in four completely different software in three different machines. I used the tool that I'm using for this presentation for the first one. I used my smartphone and a tool from Adobe to create the second slide. I used Procreate on my iPad to create the third slide, and I used Google Slides in my laptop to create the fourth slide. And 3 out of 4 are free. People can use this. Like, it's really, really simple. If you go online, you can pick a tool and you can build and design and think and use these tools to plan or use these tools to communicate. And there's thousands of them, like thousands. If you look at this little thing here, there are a bunch of tools. And there are some here that I know you guys probably will disagree, but I left them here on purpose because I really think that these are design tools to some extent. So I'm going to reset the timer, put the timer here, 20 minutes. If you can count, how many of these tools have you already used during your life? Go. Ten, 8, 9, 12, 18. Lorenzo, damn, 14, 13, 10, 16, 13. So people are still kind of trying to wonder, but like, yeah, that is like at least once most of us have used any of these tools, right? Even if it's just for testing it out or trying to build things. If I look at my experience from all of these tools, I've used these. So all of them do different things if you look at it, and all of them were used in different parts of my life. If I look at the last year of my work, I probably use these tools. And if I look at what I do day to day, I only use these. Figma for design, I use Procreate to sketch, I use Webflow to build stuff and design to code. I use a lot of Google Slides, and believe me, people trash slides, but slides do the job. I use Miro for a lot of whiteboarding, and I use Notion for a lot of documentation. And at least for me, those are design tools. Documentation is a design tool for me, for sure. Although I don't do it as much as I would love to, they are. So technology has enabled us to the point where if you need a tool, they exist. And if I look back to this list, I can tell you that at least half of these are free. So anyone can just pick them up if they have the technology to pick them up. If they have a laptop, if they have a Chromebook, which is literally a computer with no drive in it, you can open a browser and open a tool. So it became really easy to actually use tools of design. And then open source also becomes part of this because people started sharing things about design. And it's not just open source, it's open design. Like, we started thinking on how we should share the work that we do more than just sharing pretty pictures or sharing some ideas. If you look at someone that has a UX portfolio, they share the process and they are still sharing design. And you can learn from their processes. And then you have communities all around the world that want to share design as a open practice, share the files, share whatever. So over here, you can see that GitHub is still the place where people kind of reused the way that they work with kits, with the branches, with the open conversations, and people build design stuff there. And I'm going to showcase some of those examples in the end. You have Figma that has the community of Figma, where if you create an account in the software, you have immediately access to the Figma community, which is a giant software, a giant library of free stuff. Like, it's huge. You have Open Design Alliance and Open Source Design, which are associations that defend the sharing of knowledge. Open Design Alliance is a 3D, it's about 3D software and about 3D models. You have things like Creative Commons, which were rights to share your work more openly than regular copyrights, because copyrights were really a mess, and like, it made so that people could probably register your work and take control over it. Like, if you want your work to be shared freely around the world, Creative Commons was created exactly for that, so that you can share your work with the humanity and not be limited by the strict laws of financial copyrights, which are horrible in heavy country. Only Creative Commons is kind of global. And something like the A11Y project, which is accessibility, like designed to everyone, not just those who are completely fit, who are completely who are seers. What's not, like there could be, there is, or there are blind designers. That's not that weird if you look at the way that design is a process of thinking, less and less than just a process of visual creation on a screen or on a paper. So open design and the ability of sharing kind of made this what it is, made us the democratization. It kind of led us to this point. And sharing is caring, like when TikTok joined forces to help Parkinson patients. This was literally a design exercise that happened with people who were seeing videos for fun. And someone went there and said, I kind of need help because I have Parkinson's and I can't really take a pill easily. So I had this idea, and it drafted this little sketch on the right side. The community of hobbyists and designers that actually do 3D printing got together and they built the model for a pill bottle that handles one pill at a time that you can take as a shot. And they kind of tested it out. You could see hundreds of iterations, people doing their own prototypes, playing in their homes, in videos on TikTok. And it's a process that helps Parkinson patients. But this became a trend on social media because people were sharing techniques, people were sharing knowledge, people were sharing ideas. So that process of democratization of knowledge and of information and the design practice made it possible so that Parkinson patients actually have a way of taking a pill that doesn't really happen so that they throw pills everywhere because of their tremors. So it's amazing how this works. Sharing is caring, really. So yeah, like for me, it might not be the correct answer after all. Design itself works, but open design, the notion of actually sharing everything we do, for me, feels more and more like the way to go. Don't be defensive about your job. Don't think you're a prima donna, you're a diva because you think that the designer is the best thing in the world. Because I know that that's what they taught you in college. They taught you that you were the one that knows everything about design. Like if you look at the way that the design curriculum is taught nowadays, that's what it says. It says that designers are artists. They don't say spec about this. And now there are user-centric, user experience design courses and professional degrees and what's not that actually flow away from that. But if you look at the way that design was classically taught in colleges, that is it. Like designers are artists. That's how they put it. So it's really not, Flores, no one taught me that in college, man. Sorry, but I still listen to a lot of people nowadays saying, like, if in college someone had told me that I can share my design files and I can learn from other people, like, I would not believe it, because what they told me is like how to do things, and they put this information into me that says I'm the one that knows this. No, I can't share it because I'm going to lose my job, and I need to be the owner of this knowledge. I know people that were like that. Like, I didn't have exactly that experience, but I know that I was taught like almost nothing. Sorry for bashing out my degree, but I didn't really learn that much. I learned the basics, and then I went out into the world and started working, and that's when I started learning this. But I know that the way that things were taught at college was, you are the expert in this to the point where you should not, if someone needs to, if you need to work with someone, probably, yeah, like they need to ask you all the time what you need to do. And it shouldn't be like that. I disagree with that completely. I think an open-minded sharing information type things works always better. But like with code, this leads to different practitioners. Design has a gazillion type of designers and a gazillion type of people that work with design in their days. You have artists that actually use design in the way that they build things. You have students that are still learning what design is and how they do. You have communicators, you have creators, you have hobbyists that are still learning what design is. You have people that are curious about design and they kind of practice design every now and then, but they are actually not using design as a tool every day. You have collaborators, which are people that work with us every now and then. They are not designers, but they are part of the design process. And then you have users that are actually using tools. Sometimes they also understand what design is and they can feel what design is and they can then put that in practice in some other ways. But then there are pro designers. People like me, like probably many of you, And I think we should really discuss what's our role. So that's where I want to go with next. Um, Designers, pro designers are a class atoning for their mistakes nowadays. And I say this because it was a boom in everything we did. And if you look at these two things that I have here, one is a magazine that talks about how designers should stop being stupid. And there are incredible talks in here. I would show it, but I think it's actually back there. The other one is the book by Mike Monteiro that kind of changed a lot of the way that I look at design, which is called Ruined by Design, how designers destroy the world and what we can do to fix it. And I'm going to use a lot of his quotes here because I really believe in his perspective of things. He's a little bit aggressive on the way that he thinks. I think we can actually do a little bit differently. We don't really need to be that aggressive, but I think he is right completely. Either by action or inaction, through fault or ignorance, we have designed the world to behave exactly as it's being now. These are our chickens coming home to roost. The world on its way to ruin is on its way to ruin. It's happened by design. If you read the book, it talks about how social media was built with bad intents in many ways, and we allowed to it. It talks about how the scandal behind the Volkswagen gas emissions that affects the world that we live in was because someone that designed something allowed it to happen. It's being a little bit harsh, but it really defends this. And I kind of go with it because I really believe in what he says. Because although I'm not a product designer, things that I've been sharing and I've been communicating are products that will influence the way that people live their lives. I love the place that I work because I know that my tool helps people that need to create tools have more time to think and less to waste their lives looking at black screens with lines of code. But if there's something that's going to be wrong there, shouldn't I raise the flag? Shouldn't we, as thinkers, as planners, raise the flag that this is wrong? This could really go on a bad place. So before we kind of went from designing elitist products and experiences, and although what you have there are like logos for design awards, you know that even these kind of changed. There was a lot of focus on ego. Designers were artists in that way. Like Henry said here, start by designing. The design was taught in art schools. And I think we should put this on business and perspective as well, because nowadays design and marketing are hostages of economy and politics completely. And that's why this book for me is super important than some of the other books that I'm going to share down the road, because politics is actually really involved in the way that we kind of do our jobs today. And what I got to say is, like, Mike Monteiro defends that we as doctors need to take an Hippocratic oath type of thing. And I'm going to talk about a little bit ahead. So pro designers really have a responsibility to actually change this and go from designing elitist products and experiences to design inclusive products and experiences, focusing on the user. Like Donna Maria here on the window can actually use her smartphone to talk with their grandchildren on Skype or Slack or Zoom or whatever. If we can achieve that, we actually thought that she is closed at home during a pandemic and needs human connection. We thought of an inclusive product and experience. And before we design any usable products and experiences, like if you guys don't know what Juicero is something to like a hype product based completely out of marketing, where you had a tool that people bought to have in their kitchens that had packs of juice that you would put in the machine, and you would click a button and you extract the juice out of the bag. That was it. There's nothing here. It's like, it's literally that. And you know what's worst? There wasn't a UI or a mechanic button in the whole thing. You had to use a smartphone to use it. This business went bankrupt eventually, of course, but they were trying to be innovative just by being disruptive. But the tool wasn't properly designed. It wasn't properly thought of. And nowadays, we focus a lot on designing accessible products and experiences. And I really like this article that the link is down here from Pablo Stanley that says, designing for accessibility is not that hard. There are small things that you can do, especially when you're working in the world of digital, that makes it so that products are immediately more accessible. And it's really simple when you start putting this into your mindset and the way that you build things. It can sometimes go from 0 to 60 and you go into, oh, everything needs to be 100% accessible. And you forget that sometimes accessibility doesn't really need to be that you follow the same rule book as everyone else. but it puts you in the right mindset to make sure that everyone can actually use your tools and use your stuff. But is this enough? So you remember the 20 principles for good design that Peter Rand did. They are great. They already give us a lot of rules. And then comes Mike. So what if we need something more? And comes Mike with the designer code of ethics, the way that we should be building things, the way that we should be looking at things. A designer is first and foremost a human being. I think we can all agree with this. It's not that hard. Unless there's an alien in the room, then please come and raise your hands because I really want to meet an alien someday. A designer is responsible for the work they put in the role. A designer values impact over form. A designer owes the people who hire them not just be their labor, but be their counsel. And this is really important for me. A designer welcomes criticism. And I know that being criticized is the worst type of thing, but there's a lot of things to unpack there. And depending on the personality of who's on the other end, probably they actually are right and you are wrong. It's at that point. A designer strives to know their audience. A designer does not believe in hedge cases. A designer is part of a professional community. A designer welcomes a diverse and competitive field. And a designer takes time for self-reflection. And I have something there that it's actually badly aligned, and now it's like cringing me because that 9 out of place is like, but this is really just a draft of what he thinks. He actually welcomes people to create their own versions of the design. But I really believe that this makes you think about your job in a completely different way. If you think that your job is not going to have an impact in someone's life, think again, because it always has. And it can be positive, it can be negative. It's like everyone kind of agrees that good design is invisible because it doesn't create problems. It works and people like it because it works, it's flawless, it's great. But the moment you start doing something that actually is not good design, it kind of can create that imbalance. So we kind of need to be something more to actually reach this. And as pro designers, I believe we need to be educators, we need to be enablers, and we also need to be gatekeepers, but in a good way. Okay, so educators in the way that it's our job to make sure others avoid the same mistakes that our own kind, if you say, did before. If you look at the things that designers were doing before that kind of were the bad part of it, the mistakes that were done, we can kind of like go forward and do that. Learn design and teach the design history of failures and of wins. And there are a lot of like ideas from the basic things like typography placement. So no safety smoking first, because that's what is read there. Like it's not no smoking safety first. Like there's nothing that it can do that. Or the Norman doors, which is Don Norman was really confused if you should pull or push to open a door. Like that's like weird, but it is true. If you go to one of those pull or push doors, it's always if they don't have a tag, you don't know. But even if they have a tag, how many times have you went against the door because you don't know how it actually should work? It's like it's weird, but it is bad design at some point. We have here the scandal of the Volkswagen, the diesel emission scandal that had some part of the design to it. And then you have a really cool use case, which was Strava, the fitness app that tracks where you go. They actually had this really cool feature that designs the maps with the little lines on where you run. And there was a secret US military base that was found where they were because people on social media could see that their users that were military were running in the same area the whole time. And they created kind of a map of a secret military base that didn't exist in everywhere. Like it was hidden and people didn't know. And they kind of had 1+1. And due to the way that that product was designed, safety and privacy was stripped away, and they found out where there was a secret military base. Not saying that's a bad thing because I'm really a little bit anti-military there, but still, privacy of those people was taken out, or the security of those people was taken out due to a design flaw. And we need to go back to basics. We need to understand that if you need to talk with someone that it's not a designer, you need to tell them what design is. And it could be visual basics, because that's always a little bit easier. But then you can also go and start trying to teach them little step by step what makes a good user experience or what you need to actually do good design. Learning how to speak their language, going from these design language to business terms. If you go to the business world, whatever it is, corporate or not, probably the words that we use are not going to be the same as theirs. So try to find a common place. No, don't really try to just go and be like envisioned it as design defined kind of dictionary type of thing, but more like if you need to talk with someone, quoting Mike Monteiro, never ask a client about fonts. Yes, because they're gonna love Comic Sans, and Comic Sans is a great font. Although I hate it, but it's a great font because it was created with the purpose that it was great. But still, we really need to know how to balance these things. And I know that no one likes to talk business terms, and I know that like sometimes it's even harder in corporate world. I know the amount of acronyms that I know these days, and I'm scared for myself because how the hell do I know so many like 3-letter words that mean so much more? Like it's weird, but I know them because I kind of had to learn their language to bring this into the world. And last but not least, forget all conventions. Learn about your audience. I love sugar as well, but that hurts, of course. I'm actually now with a cavity right here that was because of sugar. So yeah, I know that it hurts. Learn about your audience. Learn what they need. It's not about you, it's about them. So if you're gonna teach them about design, try to understand where design fits their world. That's basically it. Then I think we need to be enabled. After we start teaching them, we need to understand that even if they can't be taught directly, you need to enable them to do the right thing. So if you can pick them, give them the tools, give them the right tools. And I'm not saying give them the design tools, give them their tools and adjust it to design, or then give them some in between. I know that I'm a Figma advocate, and I know that's like I'm really boring because of that, and like people call me Bruno Figueiredo because, yeah, sorry, but it's a tool that much more than designers can use because it's much like Google Slides or Google Doc. It's a community type tool where people can just go in, and you can do design on a Google Docs file or a Microsoft or PowerPoint Word. You can do good design using tools like Canva, which are made for communication design and use lots of templates. You can do it. Same with Miro or this tool here called Artwork Studio. These are tools that allow people to actually design. So give them their tools, not just the design tools that you always thought that everyone needed. Fear not, because templates are your friend and great accelerators. And this is something that I know that we all want to be original, but should we? Should we really forget there was already someone before us that did that job of experimenting and creating and understanding what worked? Like slide designs and the way that I have this layout made, it was because someone already thought about grids and layouts way before I was a designer. And point them in the right direction, because there's a lot of really good things that people can read, really good articles, books, and what's not. If you look at the books that I have here, I have all of these books in my bookshelf right now. I can't say I read them all or I've read them completely, but I know that I've read some of them. And some of them are really simple, like this really simple book here from Chip Kidd, which is a book designer, book cover art designer, really well known. It's really cool to understand how people kind of think about the book as a piece. If you really want to know more about politics and design, these two books here, Ruined by Design, that I already talked in the politics of design, they are not giant books, but they give you a perception on how you can look at designing the overall world and how it fits and how design kind of existed in different parts of the world, in different parts of history even. You have stuff like Show Your Work from Austin Kleon, that it's actually a really good book about trying to trust more on yourselves, and it's a little bit more psychological, but it's made for artists to understand how and artists and creators and designers to understand how they can showcase their work. But so there are a lot of stuff there. You have websites like Best Practices for Better Design. And then stand by their ear. Everyone needs a good advisor. I think everyone kind of needs someone to talk with them and lead them in the right direction. Like even if it's just say, don't use images with a Shutterstock over, or look, I drew this on typeface. Like you can teach them some words. It's not going to hurt. Or don't use just Scholar to make information clear because usability is important. Something like that. You know, like there are things that we can still advise people. And eventually be their wing person. Get them into the world and make them co-designers, make them part of the conversation, help them be there. So have you met Ted? Like, yeah, the show is not the best in the world, but the idea is there. Like, present them to someone who needs them to actually do that. And learn when to let them go. I had a hard time doing this. I'm a brand designer slash creative director, and I need to enable people that are non-designers to do this type of work. And only now I'm learning how to let them do their stuff and eventually learn with their mistakes. Because before I was kind of like hovering and trying to control and making sure that everything is perfect. I can do it. It's going to be hard to me. I'm going to destroy myself. And we really need to eventually learn when these people are enabled enough so they can go into the world and they can put design in the right direction. Last but not least, gatekeepers, but in a good way. So you shall not pass from Gandalf is always one gift that I really love. The fact is, we should kind of defend design from evil agents, or simply put bad design, understand where there are bad experiences, when there are things that we can't really, we shouldn't really let exist in the world, or we should defend people from it or advise against it. Which I already talked a lot about. And then I'm going to finish with this quote from the book again, which is, we're late to the party. The world is working exactly as we designed it to work, and that's the problem. We're here because we abdicated our responsibilities as gatekeepers. We're here because we forgot how much strength we have. It's time to remember, wake up, and fight. Yeah, he's an asshole, but he's an asshole with great ideas. And the fact is, like, it's a call for arms. It shouldn't be a call for arms. It should be a call for, let's work together. It just feels like it needs to be a call for arms because we really went off track, or the practice really went off. And I just have a few examples. I'm going to run through them just because I know that we're already really short on time. Sorry about that. But the world out there, some examples on how communities in open design has been working out there. I already talked about the Figma community. And if you guys have never used this, I really love the way that people work here. So imagine if you had your portfolio composed by open source editable files, and then people can remix. That's basically Figma for me. It's like you pick Dribble or Behance, you put GitHub in the middle, and you get Figma community. And that brings so many cool things. You have games. You have people playing games in the design software, like the Mystery of Everson Manor or Figma Catan. Like, have you ever played Settlers of Catan with your friends during lockdown? You can now with the design software. Like in Uno, like you can play Uno inside Figma. Then you have accelerators and tools like wireframe kits, UIs. You have a lot of cool tools that then live inside Figma, like motion tools, mockups, really quick and easy mockup tools that kind of take out that unnecessary step that you have with Photoshop where you have to download a file. It's not like these are more automated. You have, if you ever had the problem with taking a Google Maps photo, you can now just use a plugin and put a map there in high resolution. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of make your work really fast. And even if you're not a designer, there are things there that are for you, like Blush, that allows you to use really high-end illustrations and stuff. And I'm going to talk about Blush as a use case of its own, or the mood board kits. So there are really great tools that exist on that world. That is people working under the same roof. And it's not just designers. There's a buttload of developers there. Plugins, it's a world that Figma has. There's a bunch of people using code to enhance the tool, and that actually really makes it much more convenient. Then great illustrations are for everyone. Blush design. I really love this product. And in case you don't know this guy, meet Pablo Stanley, designer extraordinaire, funny educator. He's the CEO of Blush, and most recently, he is Pablito Planeta, the design astrologist. This guy is funny, but he's really good at what he says. He really wants people to have access to things. So he created Blush so that everyone can kind of have access to good illustration and learn how to tell stories through good illustration. It all started with the library he created back when he was in Invision called Humans, where people can kind of play around with characters and build illustrations as fast and they would adapt. And eventually turned into what Blush is today, where he has a community of illustrators that work with him. And Blush is as fast, and let me see if I can pull the plugin on my other Figma window really fast. Is as fast as me selecting the image here, clicking on a little button and saying, I want to randomize this. Give me a second. So look at the image on the right. Let's see if it's working. And done. new characters. I click the button and now you have a new illustration. And they really wanted so that you could create and edit this type of messages really fast and enable people with good visual storytelling. So he created a tool for that. You can use it for free, or you could pay for better high resolution things. But like, if you have never seen like humans on anywhere, that's strange. I've seen it in malls in Portugal. And this is a guy that it's a Mexican American living in the States. That's how big the influence of sharing these things openly is. You also have the stories of fonts being built on GitHub, like Inter, that was created by Rasmus Andersen. And it's a typeface designed for user interfaces and focus on high legibility. But it was done with the contribution of a lot of people. And you can look at the GitHub repository and understand how many people were part of this. When I was just navigating through design Twitter, I found out that someone was trying to create a virtual design library inside Figma, and we did. And there's over 500 or 600 books in this with links to their books and their creators, and people kind of just created a library for fun, like shared, oh, these are the books that I believe are great for this type of topics. Visual Studio, it's one of the top world coding tools. It was designed using GitHub, and Miguel Solori, if I'm not mistaken, that's his name, the designer behind Visual Studio Code, actually shared these stories back last year in a conference, and you have the link here that I'm going to share afterwards. There's this little document in the Figma community called the Basics of Typography, and me and a couple of other creators are actually translating this document into different languages. So in a few weeks or a month or so, you're probably going to have not just everything written in English, but you're going to have things written in Portuguese, in Spanish, in Hindu, in whatever, so that people from all around can learn about how to do good typography. And that's it. Those are some of the ideas. I just want to thank you all for being here today. Sorry for being so long. I thought it was going to be so much fast. I have the diff site where I'm going to post. I'll then post the recording of this site when Joanna of this conversation when Joanna has it. And I really want to expand this thing. I really want to expand this conversation and eventually start doing more blog posts. What's not around this initiative of the idea of design is for everyone. So that's it. And yeah, let's fight.
Thank you, Bruno. It was great, really a great talk. I think a lot of information was shared here. I will ask people if they want to unmute and make you some questions. So feel free to do it, guys, to unmute yourselves. And if you are shy, you can always write it in the chat and I can read it out for you. But I think it's a cool opportunity to unmute yourselves and make questions. See, everybody's a bit shy.
I talk too much. I talk way too much. That's the problem.
It was a really great and interesting talk. You made me thought about a lot of things, like when you started saying like, okay, if we open this, like nobody's going to steal your job. And I remember when we start having 3D printers available for everybody, and everybody was afraid.
The way that changed, yeah.
They are gonna steal my job. They are going to print weapons, and everybody was like kind of freaking out. And I think it's a little bit the same with the tools that you showed, even though that's not reality. Of course, we can make the question. I believe. Okay, sorry, you have questions here, so I will.
Yeah, no worries. But you can finish that, and I'll answer Alex. Really fast.
I think people are quite afraid that, okay, if anybody can make a website and create a website, where is my job going to go? But
yeah, for sure.
I really don't think things are like that. I think the real concern here is, are they going to do it properly? But then again, we have communities, we have free knowledge everywhere available for people to reach out to it.
I actually love, when it comes to these points, I actually love a thing that our CEO told me one day, which is, why do we need jobs? If we can automate everything and everything can work for us, why do we need jobs? Exactly. The world would be better if we actually didn't have to work. We just have to be creative and have fun and develop knowledge. So if we eventually get there, I would say that that's the end goal of this type of things. And yeah, like I'm not afraid of someone learning to do my job better than me. Like I'm an average designer at best. I just kind of think a lot of stuff, and I have too many ideas on my head. That's it. But I'm not like a great designer. I'm an average designer in my honest opinion.
I think you're a great
So
designer, but I think it's very like humble of you to think not. But the point is that
but I don't. That's the thing. Like I don't. And the fact is, I know I don't think that because I know people and I've learned from people that I assume, at least from what I've learned from them, that they are better than me. And I want to one day be at a place where I feel like I am there. But I'm always going to be like, I'm never going to be as good as some people here, or I don't think I'll ever going to be. If I get to the point where I feel like, oh, I'm actually a great designer, then I have failed my job because design is always about evolution and it's not. So,
exactly, and we will always have people, no matter what we do, better than us, and that's a good thing, I think, because that keeps pushing us forward as well.
Yeah, so
Alex?
just answering really fast to Alex's
Yeah.
questions. The slides, I'm going to put them in the website in a few minutes. I just didn't want to put them there before the talk with them. So I'm just going to have a button with a link to the Figma prototype, and you can just enter it and have fun with it. And I think I'm going to have a page on the first slide, not today, probably tomorrow, with all the links so that everyone can just click and go through the links and get whatever information from those things. Then how do I set deadlines for personal projects? Hard one. I had way too many personal projects in my life. I ever since I was a kid, I kind of like did a lot of personal projects. But back when I was in college, I had a cultural magazine. It was me and a couple of friends, and we kind of delayed a little bit on a lot of things. When it started with design and I wanted to start doing things, I also tried to set some timings and some dates. But I can't say that I set deadlines for personal projects because unless I have something like this today, where Joanna invited me to talk and she gave me a date, which was actually not today, but then it eventually became today. That kind of pushed me to, okay, I'm going to put my best into getting it out there. So it depends a lot. I have a lot of personal projects that I started and then died, and they exist in a folder in my computer. And someday in my life, if I can put them out there, I'm going to try and do so. But I'm not too overly attached to my personal projects because if I know that many times if I don't do it, there's a gazillion of people out there where I can give them my ideas or share it or even learn from theirs, and they're probably going to do a better job than I did. Good with the time that I had. What is my vision in these years to come about XR, AR? Not sure if you approached this topic already. I didn't, but I gotta say I'm a nerd to the point when I was 15, I was playing around with AR. So like there wasn't that many tools back then. I don't know if you guys remember this little game for portable PlayStation. It was like the AR pets or something. It's like it was one of the first more openly experienced shares of augmented reality. But like, and back then I got so interested in how that worked that I started learning how we could play around with those things. And I didn't saw proper use of those except on sci-fi, where I would see like people with headsets that now exist that actually change the way that you experience the world. And for me, that's where things are eventually going to go. The mixed medium between digital and human and tactile and physical needs to exist because we can't run out of it. There, if you ever thought about the fact that we design for squares, but everything else around us is much more than that, why do we design for squares? But why do we design for rectangles in a screen where you push pixels? If you eventually can actually have interactions with the real world. And I think mixed realities and augmented realities are a next step. I'm not sure if they're going to be something completely part of our life for a while, because there are also a lot of ethical and cognitive things that we need to think about before we actually make them totally available to the general audience. And some failed examples like that are the Google glasses for sure. They wanted to do something that people actually were, the technology wasn't there, and neither was the awareness that how that could actually help them in their jobs. And nowadays you see augmented and virtual reality applied in things like how Microsoft does with the HoloLens and how Motion Leap, which is a really interesting technology that talks about not pixels, but photons, just they changed the game completely on how you see 3D space in digital spaces. The way that they do, they focus on working projects type of thing, like where this is going to be used by the workforce. And I agree with that as a starting point, because it's still the best place to test out how these things can actually influence the human experience, because they are augmenting job roles that need augmentation. But from that point on, I think for general use, we're still gonna have a lot of work ahead. And that doesn't mean that we don't already have it. Like if you never picked up Google Maps while walking down the street, you can actually use AR to know where you're going by Google finding which buildings there are, and it tells you where the turn is by a little 3D arrow that floats on the air. That's amazing. But do you think that would work if you are always using a high set, like pair of glasses with that always nagging your vision? How does that not influence the way that you live your life? So I think it's inevitable that we get there. I think sci-fi in that matter kind of was right, but I think we're going to still think a lot about it. I think that we'll think, see, there's a lot of thinking here before it actually becomes a reality. Yeah. That's it.
And thank you, Henry, for your question. Anybody
Sure
else?
if anyone has. I would love to hear your voices, people.
Me
Do
too.
not be afraid. Okay, I guess there's no more questions.
Okay. I think it's a bit late and maybe people are hungry.
We're 1 minute off time, so.
Yes. Thank you a lot. I was meant to tell you also, like, it was a really funny slide when you mentioned the designer ego. I remember reading a book in the university by Bruno Munari. I don't know if you know them.
Yeah.
He wrote it like long time ago. It was exactly like the artist and the designer and what one does and the other does. And what I remember is him describing the artist as somebody that has this huge ego, and everything he does is like to express his emotions and his feelings and his needs, like completely wary of everybody that will see it. It was him. And the designer was this good chap that wanted to solve the world's problem in his little land. And like, and when I was reading it, okay, decades passed since he wrote it, sure. But my thought was like, this is so not what is happening right now. And there's the...
And as someone mentioned before, that like you could see that design was put in the same pocket as art for a while, and art was always treated as about you. It's only very recently you can see examples of how art started becoming something more community and less about the artist.
Exactly.
Even the role of art changed in the last few years, but the fact is, if you look at the way that people build their artwork and what's not, they were focused on, if you look at more classic stuff and Renaissance, you see they were focused on portraiting people and creating experiences that was wherever was on their minds. I'm not the one to talk about history of art. I'm not great at that. But if you look at Jackson,
social criticism in old art as well.
Of course,
not all of it, but you have it, yeah.
You have it. You have social criticism, but it's still the what I'm saying is the designer role kind of goes over the talking to outside, like from one end. We talk with the outside, and the artist was always talking for the outside. And nowadays, it feels like a lot of art experiences and a lot of art work is actually done to be more interactive and create that communication between two parts, and not just about the ego of someone saying, "I think the world should be like this." So there was a change in the mindset of humanity, and not just a change in the mindset of the role of a designer. So that also helps, and it's part of all this. Like, if you give everyone the tools to do whatever they can, like, it's amazing. I'm going to go with the example on Figma again, but Nigeria has a giant community of Figma users. And it's one of the design growing poles in the world. Like, if you think about going on Twitter and look for Nigerian designers, UI, UX, product or graphic designers, you're going to find thousands of them. Would you expect a country in Africa to be that present in the world of tech, for example?
I didn't.
Probably wouldn't, but the fact is the tools that enable them. And some of the first education groups from Figma was people in Africa that since Figma was free and on the browser, they could run it on really low-end computers, and kids in school could start learning about design. So if you give space for people to actually pick these things up and use them, eventually you're going to be better at like evolving as a group. So it makes sense that these things kind of become more brother and brother, and it changed the mindset not just of a role but a whole community itself.
True. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you for the invite.
I will push again. If nobody else wants to make any question, I will just thank you all for coming, and thank you, Bruno, a lot. It was really a really interesting talk. I will share the record briefly, and I will share it with Bruno so he can put it in his website. But I also added to the Interaction Design Foundation Winter Talks playlist in YouTube, so you can check it there. Thank you once more.
All right, before we go, Bruno,
sure.
Shout out from Nigeria.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that mention. Like, it's really a big experience down here recently with the design and tech of a thing, and we're really grateful. Like, we are eating the map right now. Seriously, like we're getting you guys' attention right now, and it's really something like it keeps us going right now over here with the lots of stress coming from all other things around. At least we have this hope in tech and design of a thing that is gonna actually make some things happen for us right now.
Yeah,
well,
and
thank you very much for the.
I really hope that. No, I'm telling this because when I say this type of thing, is like I've probably already tried to help mentorship at least 3 or 4 junior designers from Nigeria, from Twitter, just because they reached out through my inbox, because I know that it's still a growing market there. And
yeah,
I'm saying this, but it's still a growing market in Portugal. It's something completely new for us too. Like if you look at the way that Europe treats design, some countries like ours are still getting there. But I really want to make sure that, like I felt not many people helped me get there, I want to be part of getting more people into this conversation because it makes sense to me. So great job there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's really a nice section, like from the start to the finish right now. Like it's really been interesting. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Shola.
Bruno, thank you. Have a really good night, everyone, and see you in the spring talks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.